Okay, so welcome to the Local Foods Open Space discussion. I'm going to go ahead and get started with introductions here. Again, as I said, we have two great speakers who are going to speak to us on fall farm activities and COVID-19. First up, we'll have Jeff Jackson. He is with the Arkansas Department of Health. Jeff's role over there is the environmental supervisor for the retail food program. And he's going to share just some of the recent guidance and restrictions that have been coming out with COVID-19. And we'll get to his presentation in just a moment. And then we'll follow with Ruth Pepler, who is owner of Dogwood Hills Guest Farm here in Arkansas. And Ruth, you're gonna have to remind me in a second, exactly where is it? Is it Harriet, Arkansas? Did I get that totally wrong? I can't hear you. You can tell us when you come on in a moment. Don't worry about it. And she's also, as I said, the president of the Arkansas Agritourism Association. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. I will say Dr. Perez unfortunately can't be with us today. She does send her regrets, and she will, I'm sure, look at the recording later. So if you guys, or the chat, so if you have anything you want to say to her, please feel free. But with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And Jeff, you're up first. I think you said you could share your screen if you need me to do. Okay, you're good. All right.
Good.
We'll go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hang on just a second. I got to move it. I'm using two screens, and so I got to drag. All right, we're going to make it work this way. So as he said, my name is Jeff Jackson. I'm with Arkansas Department of Health. My job title is not my functional job title as of right now. Right now, I am pretty much 100% COVID-19, reviewing large event plans and things of that nature. So little job shift for the last 4 months. But today y'all want me to talk about fall farm activities in the COVID-19 pandemic. If you see me looking away, I'm sharing two screens, and so just bear with me on that. So as y'all know, fall farm activities would include things like hay rides, corn mazes, educational tours, petting zoos, and pumpkin patches. I'm not going to spend just a huge amount of time telling y'all what you're here for. But you know, COVID-19, just a few quick things. I'm not going to get way off in the weeds on the virus, but I do want to mention kind of how it spreads. And so it's a respiratory virus, or a respiratory illness. COVID-19 is a respiratory illness that's caused by a virus called SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so there you may see those terms used interchangeably in the news. One is defining what the virus is, the other is talking about the illness itself. It's primarily transmitted by droplets. So every time you cough or you sneeze or just talking to someone, you're expelling droplets that if you're infected with COVID-19, you may be transmitting that virus as you're speaking. And it also can be what's called fomitic, or on surfaces. So if you touch something and it has the COVID-19 on it, there is a chance that you could get that if you touch your mouth or your eyes or your face or something like that. That's not the primary way that it's transmitted though, but it is something that we need to keep in the back of our mind. So with that, generally, these are the things that you do to prevent the spread of COVID-19. First, we want that 6 feet distancing. There's been a lot of studies done on the droplets with regards to other respiratory viruses, and in general, those droplets don't travel much further than 6 feet. So if we can maintain that 6 feet distance from other people, then we have a lesser chance. Also, good hygiene anyway. Cover your mouth if you're going to cough or sneeze. And if you're in the public, you need to wear a face covering. I have face covering here on my desk. I've got one in the truck. I've got them everywhere, it seems, these days. But anytime you're going to be in public and you're not ensured that you can maintain social distancing, be sure and put that face mask on. Also, try not to touch your eyes, your nose, or your mouth. As I said, fomitic transmission can occur through that route. We're going to clean and disinfect frequently contacted surfaces a lot more often. things like door handles, restrooms, things like that. We're looking at trying to make sure that those are as clean as possible. And another big one is if you're sick at all, if you have a fever or stuffy nose or sore throat, unless you're going to get medical care, stay home and stay safe. And then lastly, again, practice that good hand hygiene and make sure you're washing your hands or using hand sanitizer when you don't have hand washing available. So all of these events, all these fall farm activities are going to fall under what's called the directives for large indoor, or there's another directive for outdoor venues. And they're basically the same directive. So I'm going to talk to them as if they're one directive, but they are in fact two. The first requirement is that facilities may operate at 66% of their total capacity. So in order to figure that out, you've got to figure out, how many people you can have at maximum capacity in your facility. If it's a large open area, that number is going to be pretty high. So you can base your capacity off of previous experience with the number of attendees that you've had in your facility at one time. Any facility or any event that's planning to have more than 100 persons will need to have a plan that's reviewed by me. There's actually about 2.5 of us that are doing these plans. So it's either me or another guy most of the time. And I will give you some information on how to submit your plans here in a little bit. The next thing is think about your venue, and a lot of these I know have a lot of different activities that go on. It may just be, you may have a corn maze, but you've got slides and corn cannons and sandboxes and all kinds of things. And so anywhere where you think lines may form, you need to mark on the ground or use cones or have someone there to monitor to make sure that people aren't invading that 6-foot distancing requirement. For example, in a corn maze, a lot of corn mazes have signposts and things throughout where there's questions that ask you to go, if you answer the question right, you get the right direction, and if you get it wrong, you get the wrong direction. And if you have chances are that's where people are going to bunch up. So you might need to have someone in the maze to kind of prevent that. If there's places where there's doubling back or things like that, just have someone in there to kind of facilitate that and make sure that people keep moving and aren't standing in one place. If you provide any kind of seating, you need to arrange that seating so that groups of people can maintain 6-foot distance between family groups. Of course, face coverings are going to be required anytime social distancing cannot be assured, and children under the age of 10 are exempt. And so times when social distancing can't be assured would be if they're forming lines to come into the building, or if you offer a gift shop or something like that that's indoors, or even an indoor concession stand or something like that. Hand sanitizer, according to the directives, needs to be available at the entrances and exits. However, due to the size of these venues, we would highly recommend multiple places where hand sanitizer is available. You also need to have signs that are posted at the entrances that remind people that if they have a fever, cough, shortness of breath, sore throat, or contact with someone who is known to have had COVID-19 within the last 14 days, that they need to not enter. You also need to have a sign that says that you should consider not entering if you're over the age of 65 or you have underlying health conditions such as chronic lung disease, diabetes, and things that make you more susceptible to ill effects if you contract COVID-19. Again, those people may wish to refrain. That's just a strong encouragement, but the people who are symptomatic do not need to enter. We do allow concessions, but you need to make sure that you're restricting access to consumer self-service items. So, you don't need to have buffets or condiments out for people to serve themselves. You need to restrict that back so that we're cutting down on the places where hand contact is. The facility, if you have any kind of a facility, has to be cleaned and disinfected before and after each use. So that would be daily. And then frequently contacted surfaces need to be disinfected, often throughout the event, at least hourly. And that may need to be increased depending on if you have a lot of customers in the facility at one time. You need to be sure you're using products that have a label that indicates that they are effective against emerging pathogens. At this point, there may be some labels that do say that they kill COVID, but they don't necessarily have to say that. They just need to say that they're effective against emerging pathogens. You can search for EPA List N, as in national. EPA List N will give you every approved product that will be effective against COVID-19. And it's important to remember with any chemical that you follow the manufacturer's instructions for use. There's very specific concentrations and contact times that need to be met with these products, or you're not killing the virus as effectively as you think you may be. Lastly, on this slide, you need to screen all your employees for symptoms daily. Any employee who answers yes to questions related to whether or not they have a fever, sore throat, loss of taste or smell, or have been in known contact with someone within the last 14 days. If they answer yes to any of those questions, then you need to exclude that employee from work until they can no longer answer yes to those questions. So some considerations to think about. How will physical distancing be maintained in your events? So how are you going to do it if lines form? How will you do it in a maze? It's fairly simple in a maze, but it's a lot more complex on things like a hayride. On a hayride, you're going to need to think about how can I maintain 6 feet physical distancing between groups? Maybe you need to have reservations for groups, or block off some of the seats to where that they can't be accessed, and things like that. You're also going to have more touch points as you're getting on and off the wagon and things like that that you need to consider. And then what about at other attractions? Slides, corn cannons and things like that. Those are all going to generate a lot of activity and a lot of use. And so, really you should probably think about whether or not those activities can be closed or modified in some way to make them safer. And then, what frequently contact surfaces are there at your venue? Of course, corn cannons, everyone that walks up is going to touch that cannon. Petting zoos, the same thing. One thing I will note about petting zoos, because I know that a lot of our pumpkin patches and things have a petting zoo along with them. There's not a lot of information out right now, but there is a few cases where COVID-19 has been transmitted to animals, specifically dogs that I'm aware of. I'm not sure of any livestock, and we're not really sure if it can come the other direction. But there's a lot of things still unknown about this virus right now. We don't think that there's a great risk to it, but you just need to keep that in mind for the protection of your animals more than anything else. And then, of course, you're going to have doors and restrooms and things like that, and just think about how you're going to sanitize those facilities. Another consideration would be to think about screening all your attendees too. I mean, I know it's going to be a lot of work, but it definitely will be safer if you can screen your attendees to make sure that they're not symptomatic or haven't been in contact with someone who is positive for COVID-19 before they come into your facility. Again, as I said earlier, consider closing or modifying some of your events to make them safer and make sure that social distancing can be maintained. And, think about contingency plans. What do you do if an employee tests positive? Is that going to shut your entire operation down? It depends on the employee, I'm sure, and how much contact they've had with other employees. So keep those things in mind. Also, what if we identify a cluster at your event? What are your next steps going to be? So some of those things you just need to think through and make sure you have a good plan for how to address them. So as I stated, you probably do want to take a picture of this slide if you have the ability. I have a link here for the directives. All of our directives are available at the first link. There is a new directive that went into effect today, which is for face coverings when you're in public. In case you haven't heard already on the news or wherever, face coverings are required anytime social distancing cannot be maintained. If you're indoors, that's going to be most likely all the time. If you're outdoors, then there just needs to be adequate space that you can maintain social distancing. The second link is the required signage. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've got signage made. It addresses both the requirements for not entering with symptoms and the requirements for considering not entering if you're over 65. They're both on there, so you can do that. And as I stated before, events with more than 100 persons are required to submit a plan to the Department of Health. The preferred method is through the online plan submission portal, which is available at the first link. There, you'll see two things there. One will be for the Department of Agriculture, which they're assisting us with review of some of these plans, and most likely will review plans that are related to your events. And then you can also email your events to adh.ehs@arkansas.gov. And if we get them and we end up having the Department of Ag look at them, we'll just forward it over there. So not a big deal there. We work very closely with Patrick Fisk, and he's helping us out over there. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation. I will be available for any questions after Ruth gets through speaking. And so looking forward to that, because I'm sure I've generated quite a few thoughts. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you for that presentation. That was a lot of good, useful information, particularly about knowing where to go for the directives, the large outdoor and indoor venues. I will say that many of the things you mentioned, including about the venues, are echoed in the document that we've been working on. So it's good to see there's some overlap, and there will be things that we'll incorporate, we'll try to incorporate that you mentioned today. We did have a couple questions, and I know you had said waiting, but I did want to maybe just tackle them because I think
no, I can take them now. That's fine.
Okay, awesome. They're fairly simple, I think. The first one was from Michael Drake. He asks, Jeff, is deep cleaning required when, for example, a teaching class of the same people is given a convenience break only to return to their seats within 15 or 20 minutes?
I don't know that I understand the question, and if I don't answer this fully, you have my email address. Please email me with it, and I'll answer it fully. But no, a deep cleaning is not expected. What we're looking at is, frequently contacted surfaces. So let's just use the restroom for example. We're not talking about cleaning the floors and everything in the restroom. We're just talking about cleaning faucet handles, toilet handles, doorknobs, things of that nature, very quickly to just make sure that we're keeping those sanitized as we're going along.
Okay, and Michael, if you want to clarify at the discussion at the end, we can do that if that wasn't
Sure.
exactly
Absolutely.
what you're looking for. And then also Karen Reynolds, she asked, what's the typical turnaround time for a plan to be reviewed?
We're trying to maintain 5 working days on all the plans that we receive. We have gotten a really high volume of plan submittals from universities and colleges that are planning events to go back in the fall. And so we're slightly behind that. I'd say we're probably at 6 to 7 working days right now. But we're keeping up with them for the most part. We were down to 2 or 3 working days, and that's really where we want to be. But we have gotten behind in the last week or so.
So key takeaway is to be prepared and get those submitted at least more than a week before.
At least more than a week, yes.
Yeah.
But we also don't want, we don't need events for October right now.
Okay.
We can have them, but to be honest with you, you're probably going to get pushed. It's probably going to take longer for those because we're going to push those back to handle the people who have waited into the last minute and really need a response quicker. So just keep that in mind. You're welcome to submit them, but it may take a little longer than that 7 working days if you do for an October or November event.
That's good to know. So you have a sort of a priority, a little bit of a priority in terms of timeline. Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and keep moving on. There has been some good commentary from Natasha on our team about hand sanitizers, so please take a look at that. Natasha, was there anything you wanted to quickly mention about that?
No, that's it. We just wrote it on the chat box if you want to have a look. So just be really careful because lately the FDA asked to remove few hand sanitizer that were not safe. So just be careful with that. And hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% of alcohol. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. And Ruth, before we get started, I meant to do this poll at the start of the conversation, but maybe it's best to do it now. I did have a 3-question poll for everyone. If you can answer this, even if you're not doing fall farm activities, you can say no. But I'm going to go ahead and launch that now, so you guys, and just please, if you can't answer it, we'll leave it up for about 30 seconds. Can everyone see that poll? So we're just trying to gauge an idea of who all's doing an activity this year, what activities you're doing. This is not in an exhaustive list by any means. And then also just trying to gauge an idea if you guys feel prepared for COVID. And you can be 100% honest if you don't feel you're ready. Then go ahead and say you're not. All right, and I'll leave it up for about 10 more seconds. And I will share the results so everyone, it won't say who, it's anonymous, but it'll give a percentage of everything. I'm gonna go ahead and end it now. So thanks to everyone who responded. And here we're gonna show the results so you all can see it. So it looks like it's about a little more than half of you are, excuse me, a little less than half of you are gonna be doing some kind of activity. There's a good variety of activities that we're having. A lot of the others, I'd be interested to hear about those in the discussion, what other activities you guys are doing. I will say I picked these activities because that's what I focused on in this resource document. We may add an activity here or there. I just obviously couldn't do every single activity there is. But we'd be happy to hear about those. And then finally, it looks like a good portion of you feel comfortable. I would hope maybe 4 months in, we've all kind of understood what we can do to reduce the spread of COVID, but it's certainly understandable to still be uncertain, especially as we start doing new activities that we haven't yet had the opportunity to work with during COVID. All right, so thanks for taking that poll, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and move on and have our next guest, Ruth Pepler, speak to us. She is, again, the owner of Dogwood Hills, a guest farm up here in Arkansas. And again, Ruth mentioned that in a minute where it is, so everyone knows. I know it's north central Arkansas, and also the president of the Arkansas Agritourism Association, which really is the body that sort of got this conversation going. So we're happy to have her and some of her association members on this call today. And Ruth, I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation ready for you. Ruth, did you want to mention to everyone anything, where you are, introduce yourself, or share about
Sure.
the association?
Sure. I'll tell you a little bit about both real quick. We have a guest farm. We take one family at a time on the farm for a very interactive experience for them, which has been challenging, but everybody has been complying really well. We're also working with the Agritourism Association to grow and educate agritourism operators within the state, and also to be able to be a network to them. So that's kind of how we got into this, was to be a resource for the Agritourism Association, and now it's kind of growing. So we're really excited about this. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Can you all see the just the slide?
It's showing the borders too.
Okay, let's see here.
Like all the file is on there.
Yeah, I know that this always seems to be, this seems to be my downfall with Zoom. I'm never, let me stop it here. Sorry, folks, just bear with me. All right, I think I've got it. What about that?
Yes, good.
Okay. So,
Great, thank you.
perfect. I'll go ahead and just, Ruth, just let me know when you want to go to the next slide.
Sure. Okay, we can probably go to that next slide now. It's fine. And I'm just really glad that I followed Jeff with all of the newest things that are coming up. Well, like I said, we take one family at a time on the farm. So some of the things that we've been requiring, we have masks here. Grace and I just did our first farm to table dinner after the February was our last one. So getting back into this was a little bit new waters, trying to figure out exactly how things go. We did wear masks in the kitchen. We wore masks. We have a photographer that comes and does all this, so she was wearing a mask the whole time. We seated our tables at least 6 feet apart. We did round tops instead of our normal long tables so that people could be seated in their own groups. And they wore masks until they were seated at their table. And then some of the other things that we did was increase airflow, circulation. We had ventilation fans on in both rooms, and we also sanitized the intake areas of our HVAC. So everything that we could do to make it a safer environment for our guests while we were kind of feeling the waters out. We only had a few, which was really nice, and we got to kind of go on from there. You can go ahead to the next slide. I think that one's masks also. Yeah, so Grace is plating the food here, and we were, now as far as we've been told, there is no transmission from food surfaces to the oral route. So we were more wearing masks here, not because of the food preparation, but because of the proximity with the photographer. So that all had to be taken into consideration specifically for COVID. Okay. Hand sanitizers. We have several different types that we use. This one is a foaming sanitizer that we have right by our sink, and it's a soap one, antimicrobial, and we have that by our sinks. But I think the key on here is that we're using these lick block, salt blocks, you know, for goats. Those fit a lot of the hand sanitizers really well. So this one is by our wash sink. We have antibacterial soaps in our bathrooms. We have foam hand sanitizer and gel hand sanitizer in different areas. And they are all at least 70% alcohol for cleaning. Okay. Okay, here's some other ones. This is by our milk stand. I'll go back to masks here also. We are able to keep everybody spaced well apart when we are in the barn. We also have our doors open. We have fans running, but we also have this area where you're gonna have two people very close to each other. So we ask our guests all to carry their masks with them. And if we get into a situation like at the milk stand where we would have to reach over and assist somebody, we ask that people wear their masks at that point. And then when we get back to spread out again, then we can also do that. They can take their masks off. So we have the two different ones. The one on the left is your foam sanitizer, and then the other one is your Germ-X. I also have, I think it's on the next slide, Rip. Yeah, there we go. We have them as we enter. This is our fodder house where people are going to be going in and helping with the fodder. So they can stop there, put their hand sanitizer on, and then also go in, put their masks on, because there's another spot where we're going to be in close quarters. And then we also keep hand sanitizing wipes, and we keep wiping those doorknobs down as we're going in and out throughout the day. Okay, next.
Sorry for the jump ahead, Ruth.
That's okay. No, we're ready. Our restrooms, and you can see in here, the one side does not have a sign on it. That one's for our staff only. The other restroom is labeled restrooms, and then that one is cleaned individually every time for our guests. So the guests that are staying in our guest house have that one to use the entire time that they're there as guests. Also, the proximity of our bathrooms. Inside, we have hot running water, soap, paper towels, and a trash can right inside the door, so they can use the paper towel for the doorknob. And then the doors are able to be pushed closed with a shoulder or whatnot to shut them. They don't have to touch the handle again on the outside. There's also sanitizing wipes inside that if they feel they want to use those, also they can use them in the bathroom. And that's when we have more than one group here. If we have, like an event, we will have them ready to be constantly sanitized between uses. The stairs go up into our loft where we serve our meals. So the bathrooms, we put them right at the bottom. So the very last thing after everybody's handled animals and everything else is to wash their hands, shut the door with their shoulder, and then head right upstairs to the eating area. Okay. Okay. You can go to the next one.
It is. It's on the air cleaner. I think it's just delayed on your
That's
end.
okay. Oh, okay. Alrighty. So while we've got this screen up, is that the last one, Rib?
Yes, and then it's just the exit screen. Yep.
Okay. So we got these UVC lights. So it's your blue UV light. You'll see them sometimes in hospitals, restaurants. I'll have them maybe up over their air vents. This one is a UVC, so it also has the ozone in it as well. And at the end of our day, we go ahead and put these on. It has a timer on it. You cannot be in the room at the same time like the traditional plain UV lights. You have to leave. It creates quite a bit of ozone and it goes off automatically. But what I like about this with the ozone, where a blue light, it's more of a straight down, any top surfaces, it doesn't get underneath. The UVC with the ozone gets all under the surfaces, all the, like the spinning wheel behind it, it would get underneath that floor, it would get underneath the bottom surface of the spinning wheel, things like that. So our use surfaces, like the tables, the backs of the chairs, everything like that, anything people are going to touch, that's all cleaned and sanitized. And then at the end of the day, we put this on, and then you have to give it at least 40 minutes before you can go back into the room. It needs time to air out. But we've been very happy with this. Some of the other things that we're going to talk about too is you have cleaners and you have sanitizers, and a surface needs to be cleaned first prior to being sanitized. There are a few products out there that do both. You have to really look though and look at your labels and see whether it says it's a cleaner or a sanitizer. If it is just a sanitizer, you need to clean that surface first, whether it's soap and water or some other type of cleaner, and then apply your sanitizer and then let it air dry. And then what we do on top of that is we put off our UVC lights at the end of the day. We also use them in all of our bathrooms, things like that. In our guest house, we rotate as we clean. We put it in every single room, shut the door, do that room, and move it around to the next room. Let's see. Also, we talked about, Jeff talked about screening the employees and the guests. That is something that we've put into practice. We've asked our guests that are going to come stay with us on the farm to be practicing social distancing. We've actually turned away reservations where people told us flat out they weren't being compliant with that. I said, well, then you probably need to find another place to go for vacation, because we need to maintain the safety of our guests that are coming, and they're all using all the precautions they can. Even when they travel, I remind them to make sure they bring paper towels in the car for handles, restroom breaks, things like that. So I think most of them are traveling with Clorox wipes and things so that they can wipe off the gas pumps and all that kind of stuff. So just making the extra measures. And oh, the petting zoo, that was the other thing I wanted to mention. And a while ago, an elderly country vet had told me that I was not allowed to let Gracie, when she had the flu when she was a kid, be by the cows. We have dairy cows, and she was milking them, and he said, do not go near the dairy cows until she's better from the flu, because the cows could catch the flu from her and give it back later. So with that in my head, and just having been told that, we told our guests too that there's no cow kisses, no kissing the dogs on the face. Don't let the dogs kiss your face. They can pet them, wash your hands, but there's not to be any facial contact with our kids and our animals. And I think everybody's been really great about that. They can still cuddle and hug them. They just can't kiss them on the nose. And I think that's just been an extra precaution we've put in there. Just to be on the safe side, I thought it was a good thing to pass along. So I think that's pretty much it, unless people have questions. That's fine for me.
Sure. Thanks, Ruth. We appreciate you sharing your farm. And Ruth, real quick, since this is sort of a fall farm discussion, but I mean, it obviously a lot of what have you mentioned can apply to that. Was at your farm or any of the association members, the Agritourism Association members, are there going to be activities that you know of? You mentioned the petting zoo. Do you have anything at your farm? I know you're mostly a guest farm, but or can you speak to any of that?
Yes, I think there's a couple of people on too that might want to chime in. Sandy, and I can't see my whole screen as far as everybody that's in here, but I know Sandy's got a petting zoo. We are going to have our cast iron cook-off again this year, but we are not opening it to the public. And I couldn't figure out any way to have the kids be able to sample and learn from the chefs and do that in a safe way by opening it up to the public. We will rope off or at least mark on the ground where each family is going to be that's cooking, and then masks will be required when they're presenting their dish to the chef. And as far as we can tell, with that, we'll have extra bathroom facilities and hand washing stations. We have about 4 or 5 of them already set up on the farm. So just spreading those out, using as much of the farm space as we can. We will stay under 100 people, just because we can do up to 250 for that event. 100 is less than 100 is very comfortable for me with this. And I think it'll also just be those individual kids that are competing, and then their family, and they'll have their own places, and we'll be able to spread people out pretty far. Also, one of the other things we're doing when we have people like that on the farm, we'll be wiping down gates where people would commonly put their hands on the gate by the animals. We'll wipe those down. That's pretty easy to do with the wipes, just keeping them in handy spots. And also making sure we have plenty of disposables in use for that day. And I don't know if Sandy, are you doing anything in particular with your with the petting zoo there? If you don't care, I'm sorry, put you on the spot.
Our animals are not set up as a petting zoo so much as just observation. And so what we have to focus on are the groups that we take through. And by and large, they're family units, which has been really nice. But if we do have a larger group, we're still trying to figure out exactly how we're going. We haven't done it yet. We've not been open to the public yet. Trying to figure out exactly how to manage that. So I'm enjoying hearing what you're saying, which all applies very well. We normally would let the guests, under certain circumstances, feed some of the animals, but we have decided to completely do away with that. So no one's handling anything or giving the animals anything or touching animals. So anyway, that's kind of where we stand at this point.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. I was just looking over the document that I had been working on, and some of the things that we sort of went over, I think that might be of interest to folks is, if you're going to do a hay ride or a wagon ride, and this is just some of the things I found online. I'll say there isn't a ton out there yet. I think we kind of are on the tip here of starting something, but there are a few farms that have thought about it, and it is, I don't want to say it's common sense, but it makes sense. It's similar to what other places are doing, for example, inside of retail stores or restaurants, just this placing signs or tape or things down to mark where you're supposed to go. So for example, on a wagon, you want to think about the area people are seating. Can they space them 6 feet apart? You can keep families together, so keep that in mind, but put tape down where they're supposed to sit, put signs inside of the seating area that communicate, make sure that signs are communicated in English, other languages, maybe use pictures. So keep those things in mind. You may want to have someone sit in the seating area to make sure people are, keeping their masks on if there's not 6 feet of distance. So things like that. Also, the other thing that I found was booking and reservations. So if you're not used to doing that, that may be something you want to do this year. It is a little bit of more work. It may require having a staff person that's a little more dedicated to that operation, but it would allow you to manage volume. And that's particularly something you would want to do if you do a corn maze or hay maze or any activity where there could be too many people in the space at one time. You want to make sure you're really managing that volume. Pumpkin patches and fields, you may just want to keep track of the people, but assess how large the space is, and make sure you're not letting too many people go in. I was at a blueberry patch about a month ago, and it was a great activity outside. Got fresh air and never felt that we were overwhelmed, but they were busy. So it's possible. A lot of UPICs have stayed in operation this summer, and I believe many have seen an uptick. So if you have any kind of field activity or patch, those are great to keep around for this season. Did anyone else have any questions? I haven't looked at the chat since the last few minutes, but or does anyone have any questions for either Ruth or for Jeff? Or tips, or has anyone started thinking about activities on their own farm?
Rip, while we're waiting for questions to come in, if they can also, as the lines are forming for the different entries, whether it's the pumpkin patch or the hay maze or hay ride, if they pre-sort their groups and then they have an idea, you might know you can maybe put 20 on the thing, but if you've got 3 families and you know what size they are, kind of like when you're getting onto a roller coaster as a group, they kind of pre-sort you to see how many people are going to fit, and that might save a step when you're trying to get people onto it, if you've got them a little bit sorted as they go in.
That's a good point. I think what I've found on a lot of this is just sort of really thinking about your specific activity, the space you have, and how best to keep people distanced, make sure they're wearing masks, and if that requires you sort of having more staff, if that's possible for you. And I would say just clear communication. I don't know if anyone wants to speak about liability. Jeff, I don't know if you have any idea on that. I know I did find some things stating about having people sign a liability waiver, either if they buy a ticket for an event or when they enter, just as a way to make sure that your farm is protected in the event that anything does happen or occur. I don't know if Ruth, you guys do anything with your farm, if you're thinking of incorporating that, but that's just something for people to consider.
This
Yeah.
is Jeff. Yeah, yes, I would recommend that you consider that. It's not something that I can necessarily guide you on, but you know, each business should have a legal representative that they can consult, and I would recommend that you do that for sure.
Yeah, and we have full coverage on our liability, but also if you're doing a special event, maybe you're doing just one fall activity, you can get a rider also for yours for a special event and not have to pay for the whole year for that one event. So that's something to ask your insurance agent about also.
And that reminded me, Ruth, I think when we first started talking about this, we were speaking of riders, the bounce house castle.
Oh yeah,
It's not
right.
necessarily a fall activity, but I think we recommend in our document to not do any kind of obstacle courses or definitely not the bounce house. Those are so fun for kids, but you know, I think we can all understand why those would be discouraged, especially at this time.
Yeah, and especially masks are not required for children under 10, and that's most of the kids that are going to be in the bounce house. So you're going to kind of just avoid that. But also take that off your insurance rider. If you usually have it on there and your insurance is covering you for that, ask your agent, tell them you're eliminating your bounce house or whatever activity you're doing, and talk to them and let them know that you're not going to be offering whatever activities it is this season so that you're not being charged. You can also save a little bit on that.
That's a good point. Did anyone have any questions or any comments? Well, as I said, we are working on a document. I'm heard some great things that I think I'm going to try to include in it. We will be putting that out eventually. I do want again just to mention everyone, go to the extension's website, uaex.edu/local foods, and just search for the open space discussions. There is a page with drop downs of all the previous discussions, the recordings, and I will eventually try to add things like the fall activity resource document in that drop down with the video recording, so you guys have sort of a one-stop shop for these discussions and their resources that we generate. We will also send out the resource to everyone on this this discussion today through email. So keep an eye out on that. Otherwise, if no one else has any comments or questions, I want to thank our two speakers today and for the information they've provided. I hope that, if anything, this has just started many of you thinking about what it is you even want to consider doing this year. Many people love these activities. They enjoy them. It does bring people out. There are directives to help guide you what you should and shouldn't be doing, as Jeff mentioned. So please look at the Department of Health's website at those, submit your plans if you plan to have more than 100 people. Wear your masks, and we hope everyone has a great summer, and we look forward to seeing what Arkansans bring to us this fall. So thank you for joining us on our local foods open space discussion. We will likely have one in the future. We've made them less frequent just because we know we're all being zoomed to death these days, but we appreciate you joining us, and please keep an eye out for future discussions. Thank you, everyone.